Oh, we're gonna move those in just a minute. As soon as they get the gas done.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, we'll put
Because
them on
one
the
is straight and then kind of break off a little bit.
Come and share with all of us.
If you want. Lo vamos a cargar porque no quiere venir el señor Stacy. Hold on. Yeah, so we want to go straight and back up because there's the...
You are good. You are good. First purpose.
Thank you, sir. Ustedes van a meterlo primero, ¿eh?
I'll be right back. I'm gonna move you in 1 second. I just want... Yes, sir.
Should be fine.
Level.
Level? Hold on, he's gonna just... Otherwise, it's not gonna be able to come out.
Okay.
Quítale el del medio.
No, I want that.
Okay. If you want to go lower, then you decide.
Then you raise up and down.
This is not gonna let him push all the way.
Okay.
Okay, so you want to try déjalo a la mitad. Déjalo a la mitad.
You want to grab these? These are yours? No, don't worry. Are you good? When did you get an accolade? Oh, right. Okay. I was waiting for my creator. He was supposed to be, he said he was going to be here at 5 till. He's speaking and singing. Oh, that was time to start? There it comes. There he is. Look, came down. Ani? Buenos días. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan ha'emet. We praise you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe, judge of truth. Stacy's last post on her blog, dated Wednesday, December 23rd, 2020. To the God of grief and grace. To the God of weariness and pain, who spoke and sang and breathed in spices, and the dust that you are and to which you will return. You who spoke and sang and breathed the name of God. To this glorious God of grief and grace, who spoke and broke, who breathed the song, we are song, and it is good. Sing and shout praise, the world is fire. The dust swirls, we skitter and sway, touching flame, touching light. We are light, and it is good. God, yes, it is good. To this great God of infinite rising, I sing your praise in light and love, in grief and pain. In glorious exaltation I rise, and your holy name is great. Psalm 121. Stacy's translation, interpretation is Sinai. I walk a path of in-betweens, of not quites and almosts. Scattershot potentials spread before me in infinite array. But I am filled enough so that even on this narrow path of scattershot possibility, bordered by almost and limbed in not quite, I lift my eyes up, raised like mountains of breath in a limitless ascent. The words of the 23rd Psalm.
The words are in the inside panel of the handout. And if you're following at home, you can take any translation you like. We'll read it in a moment. But first I'll chant it in the Hebrew. But especially because of Stacy, I can't start without noting a teaching that emerged from our classes together. Something I learned in our learning together, that because of the structure of biblical Hebrew, and here on I'll just say it, the Joseph, this can be read either as an affirmation, the way it's read right in the English, and most translations are, or it can equally be read, equally accurately, as an aspiration. So I invite you to take these words in, either as an affirmation or as an aspiration, that may God lead us by the still waters. May we find peace. Adonai roi lo echsar ino deshe yarbitzeni al mei benuchot yenaleni. נפשי ישובב, ישובב, ינחני ומגלי צדק, ינחני ומגלי צדק, למען שמו. כי ילך בגיא צל מוות, לא יירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני השולחן נגד צורריי, דישנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסור, אדוני רואי לא אחסור. Let us read together. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
There are 150 psalms in Tanakh, in the Bible. Stacy wrote Psalm 151. A psalm, a song of beauty and grief. I have lived a life of fierce joy, pursued a world of justice, every breath a hymn to your name, every step a prayer. You have lifted me, and I rejoice. You have sheltered me, and I am redeemed. And now I am weary, my body's spent. I long for your promise of sweet grass and still waters. My words have all been said, and my music, once exultant, has quieted. There is great beauty in this silence and grief. And you, God ever present, you speak so that time and worlds continue to be. You sing, and the glory of your song urges us all to rise. This was the beginning. This will be the ever and always. This is the eternal now. Selah. Craig Taubman wrote a beautiful tune, melody, for the opening line of the Amidah. Adonai sefatai tivtach ufi yagid tehilatecha, O God, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your glory. We at Hakafa had been using Craig's tune almost since I got here. Stacy came to Hakafa 11 years ago. First time she came to services, Sarah was singing Craig's melody. I apologize. All of a sudden, we heard this voice. Throw in this added line, vocal line. It was something we never knew we needed. And ever since then, we cannot imagine being without it. I don't know what we're going to do without you, Stacy. You all know Stacy was a force. Her presence was felt whenever she was near you, whether you wanted to feel it or not. She added so much energy to any space she occupied, whether it be a class, a service, a conversation, or a gentle note she posted on Facebook. Stacy was a poem and a song and a voice, and at times a real pain in the you-know-what. Usually a good pain, even in times when her pain was so great. She was a poem and a song and a voice and a prayer and a psalm. Stacy loved text. She drank it up. In the never-ending unfolding of Torah, she allowed herself to be unfurled with it and enveloped by it. The Torah was her talit, her prayer shawl, simultaneously comforting her, warming her, and itching her to readjust it every now and then. Stacy lived Torah in ways I have rarely seen any Jew do, with anger and love and passion and purpose and welcome and challenge, with all her mind, with all her soul, and the variness in between. The God she both loved to hate and hated to love, kiviyachol, as if it were possible to say, could only look at her, smile, and say, as it does in our Talmud in Baba Metzia, "My children have defeated me. My children have defeated me." Stacy's struggle with the text and the God it represents is the very struggle she and I would project in our study together, that God wished each of us would have. A struggle for meaning, integrity, and soul. In conversation with, and in the context of a community, not willing to accept an ultimate answer for any of the questions and assumptions we have about it. The Psalms held a special place in Stacy's heart. She felt them as she poured over them. And from the place of emotional depth and heart in which they touched her, she transformed them through her own rewriting of them. From dirges and elegies and prayers and odes and praises of a complicated king of old, to dirges and elegies and prayers and odes and praises of a modern complicated soul who touched us in our own time and place. Stacy put into words so much of what each of us has felt at any moment in our lives. She translated her struggle and the psalmist's struggle into our struggle through words and phrases of such honest simplicity and depth that sometimes they simply took our breath away. Stacy loved to dance in the palm of God's hand. I never quite knew what she meant by that, even as I felt that she took me along for the whirl. Stacy took many of us along on that ride, a dance for our lives. Through her books and blog postings, her Friday messages, and journaling through the counting of the Omer, through her scholar and resident stints in which she challenged us to bring out our own inner psalmist and write with her. Stacy implicitly knew the healing power of our own words, if only we would humble ourselves and let our fingers take us on a journey through our soul. Stacy knew that her words were powerful only to the extent that they unlocked our own within us. She hoped we would each become our own prophets, projecting our own hopes and fears onto the parchment of our lives. The unraveling of Torah made that much richer when we helped to write its next column. If Stacy's words were the Psalms, her voice was the lyre that elevated the words to on high. Stacy's chords were honest and raw. She never sought the melody, but found the harmony with the seamless blending grace that immediately brought richness and color to the melody at hand. There were times, too many times to count, that Sarah's and Stacy's voices clicked in that special otherworldliness that carried all of us in the space we occupied together to a place that I can only imagine is what prayer is supposed to be. Joyful, melancholy, reflective, personal, private, contracting, and expansive, all at the same time. Hava Nashira and Shabbat Shira were havens for Stacy. Her voice found a home there, intermingled with all the voices that joined together. She would send me snippets from both, melodies she thought we might like to try. How about this one, Bruce? This one, maybe? This one I got often. I know you're going to hate this one, but listen. At both Hava and Shira, especially in her later years, Stacy was able to escape from her physical and daily struggles, center herself at the core of her A minor, and be reminded of who and what she was. For a few days each year, Stacy could breathe. She was home. You all know Stacy was a fighter. Stubborn. Even a pig-headed Jew, if that's possible at times. A fighter. She always had that contrarian streak in her. Stacy cared so deeply for others and was both pained and, her word not mine, pissed that the majority of the world's problems were unnecessarily inflicted upon us, by us. Though, Nate, I'm really so glad you told me this because it's pretty funny. For those of us who knew her, that Stacy actually considered herself a Republican in her earlier years. Her work for Acorn in her 20s setting her on a course that led her to be a fierce advocate for social, racial, and economic equity and change. Stacy had no patience for meanness, no patience for prejudice, and certainly no patience for stupidity. And she was not afraid to let you know when she saw any of those. At times it came out in words, scathing, heartfelt, angry words, both spoken and written. At other times it came out in tears, anguish that she felt so deeply and personally. At times it came out as silence, which might seem hard to believe for Stacy, a woman who never it seemed to be without words, which meant that the silence said so much more than words at those moments. How dare people make assumptions about Nate because of the color of his skin? How dare people put children in cages in the name of American values? How dare the state make it so hard for people with disabilities to gain access to the services they so desperately need? How dare a vaccine not be readily available to those who are most vulnerable and who need it most? The absence of which brought about Stacy's death much sooner than any of us expected or imagined. Stacy knew we were better than all this. So she went to Charlottesville shortly after the Tiki Parade to lend her voice and support to the Jewish community there. She testified about the lack of access to services for people who need them when called upon sometime a year ago. She wrote beautiful tributes to RBG and other justice warriors, elegies when George Floyd was murdered and others were abused. And she never hesitated to reach out to any of us whom she thought might need a little love or support. And she was so smart. She had a mind on her. Stacy was well-read, spending much of her youth with her nose in a book. She had a keen ability to quote across disciplines and to make connections between things that seemed to have no connection. And even though she was stubborn with her values and her ideas, in her learning, she was willing to be wrong, to throw out new ideas to see if they might stick, to dive deep into a text and analyze it to death, and to call upon her vast breadth of knowledge to see where it took her, even if it went nowhere special in the end. Torah lishma, learning for its own sake, as our rabbis preached it should be. Stacy and I studied Jewish texts together weekly on and off for over 10 years. Most recently, just a little over a week before she died. We talked all things Jewish all the time. Ours was a running commentary on the world through a Jewish lens, as Talmudic and for me as delightful as could be. She told me to read Terry Pratchett's Small Gods, which I did and loved, integrating it into the books I use when people want to know more about Judaism and religion in general. I told her to read Steinberg's As a Driven Leaf, which she hated, and let me know in no uncertain terms, and which became the last time she asked me for a book recommendation. She participated in Hakafa's weekly Tanakh study on Tuesday evenings. She came to our yearly Tikkun Leil Shavuot when she was healthy enough to do so, to our second-day Rosh Hashanah service and learning sessions, to many of our Sunday adult eds over the years and more. She entered rabbinical school in her 50s, which we will hear more about in a minute. She learned Torah portions to chant during Shabbat services, and study Parshanut in order to give a drash or to lead services when Sarah and I were unavailable. The intersection of Stacy's love of Judaism and love of learning benefited those of us who stood at the crossroads. Both of those were her oxygen, and she lived wholly and authentically at the corner where they met. Stacy often said that it saddened her when liberal or secular Jews felt that traditional Jews were somehow more Jewish. Her very being was a challenge to that idea. Stacy, frustratingly to many, close to her, walked away from a PhD in modern history from WashU about 6 months before receiving it. She did so, typically so, over a disagreement with her advisor. There's that stubborn streak. But also because of a growing realization that academia was not for her. That's how she ended up at Acorn and eventually down her path of Jewish awareness and knowing. Academia was not for Stacy, but learning most definitely was. And then there's Nate, Stacy's love and legacy. Nate, I can't imagine what it must have been like to go from being your mother's canvas to becoming her easel without ever having the opportunity to become an artist in your own right. But this I can imagine, that you know what a wonderful human being you are, that you carry with you the intense love your mother had for you, that you understand that your mother gave you the tools to grow and thrive and make a difference in this world, to paint this world with a brush that is uniquely yours, and that you realize that there are others who are here for you and with you, that you're not alone in this time that might feel so, so lonely. In a couple moments, Mark is going to speak, sharing the words of Sheldon. Mark, you were there for your sister. And as you said the other day so beautifully, Stacy never felt she was enough. And she was. She suffered quite a bit over the years, physically, emotionally, psychically, even spiritually. As you said, if only she could have believed that she was enough. She was so strong in her beliefs, passionate in her ideas. She was so much stronger and better than she ever thought she was. 20 plus years of sobriety should have shown her that. So many others saw it and benefited from her. To some extent, she missed out on all the world felt about her because of all she gave to it and to all of us. So know this, Stacy, you were something important to this world. You were our poem, our song, our voice, and at times a real pain in the you-know-what. Usually a good pain, even in times when your pain was so great. You were our poem, our song, our voice, our prayer, and our psalm. You always will be. Kol hanishama tehalel Yah. With every breath we take, Stacy, we can't imagine what it will be without you. Amen. We're going to hear from a couple other people as well. Beth first.
Hi, I'm Beth Perlman Brownstein, and aside from blood family, in-law family, Stacy's poetry family, and her spiritual family, Stacy, along with her brothers Mark and Randy, had another family which grew from summers spent at Haran Camp of the Theater Arts on Elkhart Lake in Wisconsin. This is where I first met the Zisooks in 1974, my second year at camp. The three of them were a talented, extremely good-looking, charismatic, troublemaking, and fun force all their own, who became a huge part of the Haran Camp culture. Haran emphasized the whole of we is better than the sum of me, and excelled in the confidence building of its children. To this day, it's a place where lifetime friendships and even some marriages are created. Like, this is where Mark met his lovely wife, Michelle, where my Uncle Errol met my Auntie Fran, and where many other campers went on to create families and then send their children to Haran. I wanted to speak today through the hearts and memories of Haranders. And here's some things they had to say. According to one Harander, Stacy was friendly but quiet the first few weeks of her first summer at Haran, and much less social than Mark and Randy. But when Stacy was given a part and a solo, which she first performed for their group, he was shocked at how talented she was. And from that point forward, any time she was going to rehearse or perform, it became can't miss theater. As another fellow Harander put it, that face, that voice, and another who stated Stacy became the glue at Haran. Another theme that rang through about Stacy is that her friendship with others in our Haran family gave them a sense of belonging because they received unconditional love from her. For even during her teenage years, friends have said that Stacy was their miracle in life. Comments I've received, including many stating that when others may have teased or were mean to them, Stacy was always there to console them. And personally, had it not been for Stacy, I might have given up the role of Winifred the Woebegone and my solo shy in Once Upon a Mattress because someone else said I only got the part because my uncle was the music director. But she made me realize that I got the part because I was the best one for it and that I just needed to prove it to myself. Another camper who was in the same cabin as Stacy said Stacy was always singing, even under her breath while sleeping. She was completely musical from head to toe, and with the voice of an angel. She took each performance very seriously and was there for theater. Well, that and the red velvet cake that she always got for her birthday from the resort called Siepkins, next door to camp, right? Stacy didn't care much about swimming in a lake. So in addition to taking her long showers when everyone was down at open swim, Stacy also became the right hand to Nora Gaffin, one of the founder's daughters, following her around and, according to Nora, always chatting nonstop about something. Stacy simply loved being at camp, for after people really began to know her endearing soul, it became a safe place for her as well, a place where she could shine her brightest in those days of awkward and unsure teenageness. And speaking of awkward, of all the stories I received, it's Sandy Kolke's story that must be told, and I quote, I giggle just thinking about it. Stacy and I played opposite each other in Fiorello. I played Fiorello in the first act and Stacy played my wife, Thea. Anyway, at the end of the first act, there's a scene that ends with Fiorello kissing Thea. I think we were like 15 and neither one of us, well, certainly me, had any idea what a stage kiss was supposed to be. And we were both too embarrassed to talk about it. We avoided it until we actually had to perform in front of an audience. Well, we sort of figured that, it's a kiss, not a peck, but a long kiss. So the moment is upon us. And what was meant to be a dramatic close to the first act must have looked like a sloppy, ill-conceived, adolescent fumbling, super long and uncomfortable, archery pit, Bill Ranks shed, post-cabin night, make-out session, with tongues in full view of the entire audience. I think Pearl was strangely okay with that, but it was Sule. She was horrified. During camp contests, whether it was our cabin song and cheer or Camp Olympics, Stacy was someone you always wanted on your side because of her quick wit and creative thinking. Not only was Stacy vocally talented with this amazing stage presence and a natural impact, she was also known as being what I have put together as the perfect blend of sarcastic and funky and sweet and bossy, with a great knack for giving directions backstage and the ability to make up silly words to songs just to make us laugh before going on stage, such as from West Side Story. Instead of "take my hand and we're halfway there," it became "touch my thigh and we're halfway there." After being a camper for a few years, Stacy became a camp counselor, where campers remembered her as being perhaps a little too strict, yet comforting and helpful at the same time, like when she taught one of her campers how to put mascara on. Stacy loved spending time in the script room and was very possessive of the music room key, according to Janice Gaffin, another daughter of the founders, always wanting to be involved with everything concerning lyrics and scores. My relationship with Stacy grew well beyond a Haran camp summer friendship. Every time we saw each other, it was crazy. It was like we were right back picking up where we left off. And then we would cry happy tears in great dramatic fashion just because we were so happy to be in each other's company. There were times when Nate came to stay with us when Stacy was out of town. And thank goodness you were there. When we had that really bad snowstorm, you remember, in school, your mom's flight got canceled and you had to help me out because our pipes froze in the sump pump and it exploded in my basement. But you are so much like your mom, and I'm really grateful for that time we got to spend together. In my personal world, Stacy was a soul like no other. She gave words meaning and melody to friendship. Stacy embodied light and love all around her in every sarcastic, theatrically prepared sentence. And Stacy, like me, could quell with the best of them, like the pictures I captured of her glowing with pride as she watched Nate lead a congregation from the bima at his bar mitzvah. Often being part of each other's life events, just as Stacy did when my father passed away, she said some prayers and recited beautiful poetry at my mom's shiva 17 months ago. We were all sitting outside in my yard, me sitting right next to Stacy, and just as she led us to pause for a moment of silence, a breeze suddenly came through, ringing the wind chimes in my tree. It was truly a spiritual moment that only Stacy could bring about, and it will forever be etched in my memory. The first time I saw Stacy in a wheelchair was when she and Nate came over on Christmas Day 3 years ago. She didn't have to say it. You just knew she felt despair in her ability to move about freely. In true thespian fashion, Stacy wore the masks of comedy and tragedy quite well, often to hide her pain emotionally, and as she grew up, her pain physically. Stacy and I spoke not often enough, but I loved her Sabbath prayer for me on Fridays and looked forward to them. Little did I know, after reading numerous Facebook tributes to Stacy, that I wasn't exactly as special as I thought I was, as lots of people also received them. The last time I personally spoke with Stacy was a week ago today. She was very unhappy about having to move to an assisted living facility. But what's important here is the positive attitude and how she broke the news to me. Guess what? I'm going to be living close to you again. We had a great conversation that ended in I love yous, and we couldn't wait to see each other again as soon as we could. Lastly, there's never a Haran family gathering that doesn't end, and we're Haran, it doesn't end with this song, except I'll save you from hearing me sing it. As I say, no man is an island, no man stands alone. Each man's joy is joy to me, each man's grief is my own. We need one another, so I will defend. Each man is my brother, each man is my friend. I believe I speak on behalf of the entire Haran Camp family when I say that the loss of Stacy is a profound one. Stacy, I love you, your Haran Camp family loves you, and you will remain in our hearts and souls forever. Thank you.
Let's sing a little song of peace, just to break from the words, Oseh Shalom, the last two lines of the Kaddish. So I'd like to say, if you know it, sing along. And if you don't, just take it. Oseh Shalom bimroma, v'hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'yimru imru amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. I'm Rabbi Michael Davis. And Stacy was my student and my friend. I was asked by the family to speak of her life as a rabbinical student at the Hebrew Seminary. And I know that many of her fellow students and teachers are with us in person and on live stream, along with many, many others. It's one of the strange things that's only now that we all meet the different parts of her life. And I'm was reflecting as I heard Rabbi Elder speak, and we're good friends, that we didn't coordinate, but he said things that I'm going to say a little differently, but in my own voice. So it feels that Stacy's spirit is refracted through so many ways, and it is a whole. What is there left to say? Stacy said what she had to say, and she did it, as we've heard, so well. If all rabbis could distill what they have to say, what we have to say, into a poem like Stacy could, it would make for much, much shorter sermons. She had that gift. A gift, actually a craft, born of hard work and a fire within, delighting in words with a need to give. And perhaps all that is simply called love. One of the courses she took with me a couple of years ago was the Jewish laws around death and mourning. And one of the traditional Jewish burial practices is for the Chevra Kadisha, the holy community, the burial society, to ask forgiveness at the grave from the person they are burying. This is done in public, witnessed by all those in attendance. The Chevra Kadisha asks forgiveness of the person for any disrespect they might have shown inadvertently in the performance of the prescribed rituals of the handling of the body. First, let me tell you a brief story. Once, a couple of years ago, Stacy came to teach a poetry writing workshop at my old synagogue. We met at a venue that we had never used before. Now, this was not uncommon for us as a synagogue without its own building. We moved around. So Stacy's car pulls up right in front of the entrance of the building to minimize her walk. Her walker was pulled out of the back of the car, and she slowly got out and stood up. She carefully made her way up the path, and then, at the front door, we looked at each other. No, the meeting place was on the second floor. Of course, no elevator. I went straight into problem-solving mode, but Stacy just gripped the walker a little more tightly, looked straight ahead, and said, "It's okay." And she did make it up the stairs to lead that workshop. Stacy kept on showing up, even as that got progressively harder, willing her body to work for her. We were in class, so I was teaching her at her dining room table, when suddenly her eyes would start to close. She would tilt ominously to the side. I'd stop the class, concerned, even run over to block her fall. But Stacy just said, "It's okay. Keep going." Despite all that she experienced, and nobody should have to endure what she faced in her life, her tone, as we heard, as a teacher and a poet, and the attitude in her postings that we've heard, was one of gratitude and graciousness. But being kind and thoughtful does not mean one is blind or stupid. Not Stacey Robinson, not by a very long shot. She had a clear understanding of the extra burden she carried because of the negative forces that surrounded her and placed relentless pressures on her life and on the medical care she needed. She spoke little of the battles she was forced to fight just to get the care she needed. She understood how others sometimes saw her, and she was clear that any disrespect shown to her was not personal. It was only because of her set of circumstances and who we as a society choose to value and who we don't. She knew this and was able to speak that truth too. She needed protection so urgently, and she knew she had no margin of error. With all the treatments and contact with others, she made it through a whole year of the pandemic wilderness. Now, in March, only a few weeks stood between her and that promised land of vaccination. But our society chose to grant that protection to others first, and this final act of disrespect saddens me deeply. So in this holy gathering, this Chevra Kadisha, and in recognition of any instances of disrespect for her, including the most fateful and final one of her life, let me say to Stacy, Silchi lanu, slicha, I am deeply, deeply sorry. Now, a few words of her life as a rabbinical student. The conversations we at the Hebrew Seminary have been having, like those at her congregation Hakafa and all her circles across the country, across the world, were heartfelt and powerful. In fact, I printed out the email tributes from members of the Hebrew Seminary community, but there are too many to read out here. So for all of those of you who are close to her in other areas of her life, let me tell you a little bit about Stacey Robinson, the rabbinic student. Hebrew Seminary is a rabbinical school, and the students graduate as rabbis. But her study of Torah embodied what the ancient rabbis taught was an even higher value than studying to become a rabbi. They called this, as Rabbi Elder already said so beautifully, Torah Lishma, studying Torah for the sheer enjoyment of study itself. And it was a joy to teach her. She was a grammar geek and a midrash maven. She already had several languages under her belt when she threw herself into the study of biblical Hebrew. She quickly mastered so much material. Each week, she showed up to class with pages of homework, all done to an exceptionally high standard. It was a pleasure to read her work. She told me that on those long nights when the pain or discomfort kept her up, she would pull out a Hebrew assignment for that week and work for hours. She said this was one of the things that sustained her. And that was a lesson she taught me. At the seminary, she was becoming a teacher in her own right. Last semester, she started taking sections of the class to teach the material she knew so well herself. And early on in our time together, our classes quickly settled into a routine where we ended each session with Stacy reading one of her beautiful poems. Her poems were learned and inspired, and when I needed a poem for an event or a service, she was my first call. And her voice became part of the prayers that I led. And I was looking forward to seeing how she would express her rapidly expanding body of knowledge in her poetry. Stacey Zisook Robinson's determination as a student and her grit in the face of the avalanche of hardship she faced was nothing short of heroic. She inspired me to work at my own studies. She gave voice to our unarticulated feelings. Now, silence and peace have engulfed her body, but her spirit, her reputation, her presence, and her words live on. And if she were here right now, I would believe she would say once more, it's okay, go on. Yehi Zichra Baruch, may her memory be a blessing.
For those of us who are parents, sometimes we say things to our kids and we're not sure what's going in because it's sort of like talking to this hazy wall. But Stacy, I'm going to tell you that when I had Nate look at what I'm about to say, he corrected my grammar, so something went in. So you did good. I don't know where to begin. Because how can I put a couple of pages about something as monumentally complex, delicate, fragile, and precious as the personality and life that was Stacy's. She was extraordinarily talented. She was so loving. She was a devoted mom to her Nate. And Nate, you were her everything. She was hilarious, incredibly snarky. And I don't think that there was a single thing in the world that she did not know. She was just that brilliant. Poetry and words were her thing. And her poetry, her words, and her essays could make you laugh, cry. They could make you angry or create a sense of peace. They could make you really uncomfortable or make you see the world in a way that you never knew could be seen in that way. And sometimes you would feel all those things at the same time. It was her gift. And it was a gift that she knew that she had. And at the same time, she was scared. She was insecure, self-conscious. She was racked with self-doubt. Stacy was always questioning her self-worth. As Stacy's health deteriorated, she was forced more and more to rely on Nate and the help and kindness of others. She very much did not know what to do with that reality. In her mind, asking for help meant that others would think of her as a failure. And that was a reflection of how she saw herself. In recent years, many of her friends heard a lot about her failing health, her frustration, and her worries. And that was a lot. But I am here to tell you that in her quiet moments, she knew she had achieved what she had set out in this world to achieve. Her dream was to be a writer and to study, to share her gift, and for it to have meaning for others. All of you, her friends, her family, and her community made that possible for her. You all made it possible for her, and you all made it possible for Nate. Her greatest pride and her joy. Underneath all of the sores and the stress, and underneath all of her brazenness, underneath all of that, she felt a sense of peace because she had done what she needed to do and what she had always wanted to do. Nate, you are an astounding young man. She was so unbelievably proud and grateful and awed and humbled by you. If you don't believe me, you can ask anybody your mom has ever talked to, and they will tell you because they have all heard it. Stacy, we love you and we miss you, and it is hard to imagine a world without you. But I also know that you have touched every one of us who is here. So in a way, you aren't really gone, because each one of us carries a little piece of you inside with us.
As much as I hated being here today, I love hearing the different perspectives of Stacy. Everybody got to see Stacy differently. And it's with great sadness that I stand here today to talk about my sister, Stacy Lynn Zisook Robinson. It will be difficult to get through this, but I do take great solace in knowing that she's without pain and with our little brother Randy. I want to thank the Hakafa family for giving Stacy a home. I think that made her part of what she became. All of us that spoke today would give you the same perspective of Stacy, but with a different view. She had her family life, She had her Harand life. She definitely had her religious life, and she had her entire writing world. She was a very complicated and compartmentalized person. She was able to have little parts for everybody. You heard everybody speak today about her many accomplishments and about how she moved so many people. I hope to share the personal side of Stacy, the inner self that her family saw and witnessed her entire life. Through the years, I've had many different relationships with my sister. There always was a constant, and this I can say, Bruce, you couldn't, but she was always my pain in the ass little sister. Stacy's unique and impassioned perspective on life made her into such a creative and inspirational writer. You know, I hear that some writers, if not most, struggle with writer's block. They wait, they eventually search for a muse. But Stacy, she was never blocked. She lived every day with endless artistic expression, always writing more poems and short stories and lyrics every day of her life. Now, from a very young age, Stacy preferred a relationship to books and words. You've heard others kind of refer to that as well. Well over people. And as a child, she was always alone in her room reading books. Not just one or two a week, but typically one or two a day. She was always the smartest person in the room, and she let you know it. She even waited patiently through the last 2 years for Jeopardy to call after she qualified as a contestant. Now, Stacy dreamt of being the strong one and the friendly one, the leader of the pack, even the one that got to ride off into the sunset with that prince. I believe this is what inspired her writing. She would write about her pain, always about her beliefs, about nurturing relationships with others and with God, and most importantly, about the love and the light that she wrote about so much and she desired in her own life. Stacy, as you heard from Bruce, was definitely passionate about her values and ethics. She always chose to share those opinions, even if it wasn't asked for. And I remember many fights hearing Stacy stand up for what she believed, and she never gave in. Stacy believed that change was always better. That's probably why I felt so much pain and conflict in our relationship, because most people, myself included, are more comfortable with what already is rather than what might be. Stacy never felt anything was good enough. This especially rang true in the way that she viewed herself in the world, and I believe that she always felt pressure to be a better sister, a better mother, a better daughter, writer, friend. And I think that's why Stacy was so attracted to the world of acting and singing and writing, because she was comfortable being somebody else. She's comfortable being the star, being the person that the audience came to see, being the writer of poems and stories that others believed and felt. She wrote about her pain and about the light that she wished she felt every day. Stacy, I only wish that you could see your light, the superpower that you had, the power and the ability that you were able to give other people to feel emotion. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes indifferent, but emotion. What a wonderful gift. And you know what? It was enough.
Shoche Yomim Hamse Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShekhinah Im Kedoshim Utoharim Kezohar Mazhirim Et Nishmat Yekaratnu Shalcha Leolama Bal HaRachamim Yasireha B'Seter Knefav Leolamim Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmata Adonai hu nachlata b'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, and perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Stacy, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance, may she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. The words of Kaddish Yatom, Mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. V'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agalau v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lo me'omaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yit pa'ar v'yit roman v'yit naseh. V'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal shemei dekud shah b'richu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlamo rabba min shmaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Another poem of Stacy's, Remember Me. How should I be remembered, even through the sorrow and those moments of grief that come of their own accord and shake us and make us weak, make us bend and crumble? The sorrow passes and the grief in their own time, a slow and stately cadence, steady in the space between each beat lengthens like shadows at dusk. Remember, and I am in the here, in the slow and steady rhythms of those in-between spaces. I am motion, I am sound. Find me here in the sweep of time, in the grand abundance of life. Remember me and do not grieve for long. I am here in the song of traffic and midnight silence. I am in fallen leaves and wood smoke in winter. I'm in your generosity and in your hope. I am here in your sorrow, your grief, your joy, your love. Remember me. Hineni. Here I am. just a quick announcement. There will be 3 opportunities to honor Stacy beyond this in the coming days. On Saturday evening and Monday evening at 6 p.m., there will be a music and poetry tribute Shiva to her. Havdalah will be at 6 p.m. on Saturday, followed by folks from around the country offering songs and prayers and readings. Sunday at 1 o'clock, there will be a more traditional formal Shiva. The entire family will be there to hear you sharing stories and reflections and thoughts about Stacy and what you want to offer for the family. All that can be found on the Chicago Jewish Funerals website. The link can be there as well. Just go to her name and click on there. Anybody else who would like to place some earth upon the casket after the immediate family, please feel free to.
Gave it to him. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
I know she almost brought her on the side of it. I came this close from breathing.
I just think this is the only opportunity to connect with people. So I just want to say hello. Have a nice day.
You know, I have a daughter who's taught us the daughter of God.
I want to talk to the